Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Tonight, I wanted to talk about something I've talked about on the audio podcast. By the way, if you're looking for us and you just want to hear my voice instead of having to try to find me on Rumble, check out all podcasting platforms. The only one I don't believe I'm on is Amazon, and that's because they've made it sticky to try to get some stuff done. But everywhere else, Apple, everywhere else, I'm on there. Spotify, iHeart. New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union started as an audio podcast, and it's one of the preferred methods I actually like because I don't like being in a fishbowl talking. But I'm willing to do this because I want to talk about the 2A, and I think there's a lot to talk about here and try to get the word out of how awesome our community is, one, and two, how awesome it is for Americans in general. And this topic has to do with new shooters. So you've watched the news, you saw the State of the Union, and you realize that the government is not exactly a fan of you, or that you've decided that you needed to take some self-ownership, or you're just tired of being bullied. And I'm not talking about going and shooting up people or anything like that. I'm talking about you're tired of being bullied by the potential of someone doing some bad things to you. What do you do? Okay? So as a new gun owner, it's a daunting task to if you've never been introduced to the 2A, you're not as familiar as I am or some of the other people in the 2A that have been around it their entire life, and you're new to coming to this. People will laugh at you and say, or some people would, and say, why would you wait this long to come to the 2A? Colion Noir didn't start shooting until he was like in his 20s, and he is like the biggest 2A advocate. I want to say he's one of the smoothest. I think he's cool as hell. But he didn't start shooting until later in life. So there's a conversation to be had about when you come to this. And it's just more so, how do we get you to here? It isn't a rocket scientist thing to look around at the world we're in, seeing all the stuff that's going on with crime, seeing that after riots or when riots happen, that police have no duty to protect you, so you're going to have to defend yourself and your family. How are you going to do that? Don't let people scare you away from the 2A and say that this isn't for you, you don't want to do this. It's your right. If you're interested in the 2A, first thing I would say is find a mentor. Okay? And when I say a mentor, look at their bias. We all have biases. My bias is when you ask for a handgun. I'm probably going to lead you down the path of like a Glock or a Smith & Wesson or a Beretta or an HK or a SIG. These are big name brands, but they're also big ticket items. So it's because of the quality that's involved with that. And that's what the mentor is going to help you guide through, hopefully. If you can only afford a high point, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't be ashamed. Everyone has a starting point. And a high point is, a gun in the hand is better than one in the safe. I've carried a 380 many times, pocket carried, fishing, pocket carried, walking. Sometimes you're going to have to change your carry piece, or if that's what you're into, to fit your needs for the summer, for the winter, for the season, for the clothing you're wearing. Because, you wear a kilt. I do sometimes. Sometimes you need to have a smaller gun on you. Well, you don't need to have a gun on you anytime. I do. That's the other thing. When you're starting to get into the 2A, what's the purpose of it? If you're going to hunt, there's a different conversation you need to have and a different kind of mentor. A lot of the 2A advocates start out in the hunting community, myself included. But then we graduate to other aspects of it, and, well, as most people tell you, weapons are part of my religion, part of who I am. I've been advocate for 2A. I've been in a shooter, a lover of the sport, a lover of all things 2A for most of my life, since I was 3 or 4. Once my dad got me, he was a gun guy. I became a gun guy. The next thing I want to say about this is gun counter guys are boomer fuds. That's the best way to put it. Take everything they say with a grain of salt. Now, if they're younger, they're not FUDs. They're usually pretty into the tactical community, into shooting, and they're usually probably going to listen to you a little better. But by and large, most gun outlets, gun retailers that are of the local variety, usually are great, but they are FUDs. They have their bias. They're going to walk you in if you're female, and they're going to direct you to a 38 Special revolver. And as much as I love revolvers, there's a discussion to be had about how cool they are and how reliable they are, but there's also a discussion about what happens when they break, and are you capable of fixing that? And in a firefight, do you want to be regulated to only 6 rounds? So yes, there's something, if that's what you want, go ahead. But if you're interested in like the tactical stuff, the black rifles, this is where you want to have someone that has some chops, either military chops or has been doing this for a long time, because they'll guide you away from the missteps that you're going to make as a new shooter or a new person to this type of thing. And that's why you want a mentor. And the gun counter guys are always going to steer you towards the stereotypical guns that they sell a lot of or that they know a lot about because they're boomer FUDs. The 1911, it's not a bad gun. I own 2 of them. They're great. There's a discussion, a fight, if you're new to the 2A, always around 1911s and the Tupperware guns or the Glock guns, the plastic frame guns. They'll tell you that you only need 7 rounds in a firefight. That there's some truth to that, but there's also another truth to that. When you start getting into a firefight, you need to start thinking about the stress level you're at and what your training level is at. Because when you're stressed, you're going to go to basic muscle memory and basic things. You will lose higher functions. That is just the way the human body works. Why is that a big deal? So if you're stressed, someone's pounding on your door, they're coming in, you need to get ready to defend yourself. What goes through your mind? And that's where training comes in. Okay? I'm going to advocate very heavily for training. It's the one thing I kind of agree with about New Mexico gun laws is if you're going to carry, you should probably have some level of training. The reason why I do that is because I think about where you would use them. If you're in, say, a store, a grocery store, you want to be as precise as you possibly can. You only get that way with stress inoculation and training. So there's a conversation that needs to happen about should you have training before you conceal carry. There's that part of it. But then the other part of me that really is starting to shine right now is it's my rights, my body. I don't need to ask the government for permission. So I will do what I need to do. And to that end, I will absolutely advocate for training if you're going to be in those types of scenarios, but you can absolutely get away with not being in those scenarios or not having the training, just exercising your 2A rights. Be prepared to change your kit. So when I say kit, your holster, your mag carriers, your magazines, your gun itself, parts of the gun. Most people start out with something like a Glock pistol. Then they find out that very rapidly that they don't like Glock sights. They want an aftermarket night sight, usually metal sights. Glocks are notorious for having plastic sights, even though they say it's Glock perfection. Anyone who used a Glock will tell you their sights usually suck, and they're usually the first thing that go. The next thing's usually a trigger. That's because a Glock trigger is something you have to get used to. It's not something that is normal, especially if you come from the 1911 world. There is such a thing as a 1911 trigger that is so beautiful and sweet that you know it right away. Same thing with some rifles. I'm not a trigger snob. I have some friends that are turning me into trigger snobs, though. My friend Dex, he's like my brother. He has built an AR-10, purpose-built for what he intends it for. I think is for long-range shooting, precision shooting. To that end, he's got a 2-stage trigger in his. That is very tunable, and he brought his completed gun to me yesterday, and holy crap, it's the first time I've ever got to sample a trigger by squeezing it and realized I probably need to buy one of these for one or two of my rifles. So your kit's going to change. And especially if you're a concealed carry person, you'll find that your holsters change. A lot of people will get in with like an Uncle Mike's holster because that's all they can afford. And I'll be the first one to tell you that's probably not what you want to do. Save up some money and get a better one. But any port in a storm and a gun in the hand is better than one in the safe. And again, it's okay to have substandard stuff when you're starting out. You'll get better and you'll improve your kit for sure. I've graduated to Kydex and to leather holsters a long time ago. A lot of people, a lot of so-called tactical experts in the 2A will tell you that pocket carry is not a good option. They're absolutely right. It's not the best option. But for your lifestyle, it may actually be the only option. Deep concealment happens for some people because they've decided that they're going to take their self-ownership and defend themselves wherever they are. So they're going to be deep concealing. And for those types of guns, a holster that's on your hip isn't very feasible. And if you don't ever want to print, you probably want to look at something like a pocket holster. After your tastes evolve, because you're going to start shooting, you're going to realize that maybe you need different magazines, maybe you need different holders, maybe you need different slings, maybe your optics that you got on the gun need to change. Maybe you realize that you need optics shooting from iron sights. If you don't know what iron sights are, they're the standard sights that are on most guns. AR-15s sometimes don't have them, and you have to buy aftermarket sights for them. At that point, that's usually when you start looking at optics too. And I mentioned this before, but get training. Absolutely take that mentor, have him or her make you very comfortable around the gun you're using. So much so that the muscle memory catches. Then go actually get real physical training. Myself, I started with Tough CCW in Farmington, New Mexico. He is a retired sheriff's officer. I believe he also trained their SRT team at one time in his life. He is a former Marine. He's generally a good guy. His family's good Christian people. He'll make you a good shooter in a day, in 18 hours. And that will get you your CCW in New Mexico. But to that end, he makes you go through 250, 500 rounds at one sitting because you're going to be shooting all day. You're going to get some breaks, but that shooting and that training he gives you sticks with you forever. And he can train you on any gun. Guy is a dyed-in-the-wool gun guy. He ran a gun forever with San Juan County Sheriffs. He's also one of the reasons him and the actual sheriff of San Juan County, his wife, still have heartburns about not liking the Back the Blue movement. And that slowly goes away after one of them retires and you realize that it's better that you stick to your values, and they would want you to stick to your values. And mine are, nowadays, there are no compromises in the 2A anymore. We've compromised too much. We've lost time and time again. We've lost little pieces of our rights. Be an active shooter. That means that this isn't a perishable skill. So what that means is that you need to practice often. And in addition to practice, you need to advocate for the 2A. You need to become informed. So I recommend Gun Owners of America or New Mexico Shooting Sports Association, if you're in New Mexico, so that you can actually keep abreast of the political situation. Unfortunately, my podcasts that have been the most popular have had to deal with politics. And I say unfortunately, it's not because people are listening or that I find it unfortunate that I'm talking about politics. It's more so that politics have gotten into everything and they don't belong around guns. There are political parties that will willingly admit nowadays that they want to disarm the American populace. At the same time, they're willing to go hard and heavy against or for criminals being released so that they can do whatever they want. So there's a crime problem that's happening in addition to that they're demonizing firearms. So be active in the community. Go to the raffles. Go to the gun shows. You're going to meet new shooters. you're going to get more experience and more knowledge from them. There's more knowledge at a gun show or talking to those guys around the gun counter, even though some of them are FUDs. Take it with a grain of salt. You'll walk away with knowledge time and time again, whether it's reloading knowledge, whether it's magazines, whether it's gun knowledge. Just understand that the 2A is very bifurcated and has been forever when it comes to products that they like, that each individual likes. They'll usually advocate it for it more so and make it sound better than it actually is. This is where your tastes come into play. If your mentor takes you to go, the first thing they should do if you're interested in something like CCW is take you to a gun store. So you see something like that gun wall in the background there. That gun wall is daunting if you don't know anything about those guns on there. That's what your mentor is there to help you with. But what I'm going to advocate for is that they guide you to the gun wall and say, find the one that fits you. Rob Ski at AK Operators Union has said a long time ago, make the tool fit the person, not the person fit the tool. So when I was talking about the Boomer FUDs taking the .38 revolver, for instance, that's not a good gun for a new shooter because there's a lot of places where you can screw up and hurt yourself. Whereas semi-automatic is a little more forgiving for some of that stuff. That's what I'm talking about, is make sure the gun fits your hand, make sure it fits you. If a revolver fits you, great. But if you shoot a revolver and your mentor has taken you out shooting and they're trying to correct your grip all the time, the reason why they are telling you that is because there are giant fireballs around the frame that will burn you and possibly cut pieces off of you if the load's strong enough. That's not to scare you, that's actual fact, but you need to be very cognizant of how you hold a revolver, or hold any gun for that sake, because it's something that can kill you. This is what I'm going to tell you with the new shooters is find the mentor. That's the biggest thing to that. Do research on the topics that you're wanting to do, whether it's hunting or CCW or tactical type shooting, or if you just want to be armed. This is your right. You absolutely should be able to be armed. But stick to your guns. Once you've fallen into this community and you've joined our community, first off, welcome. Second, you need to be a strong advocate. You cannot be a 2A member and still advocate for quote-unquote sensible gun control. Because sensible gun control leads to absolute gun confiscation. There is no slippery slope in the American political space anymore. It's cliffs. And to that end, that's why I'm saying once you've joined our community, it's time to be an advocate for our community. Because you will find more often than not, people back off if you've never talked about it. And you say, hey man, I just bought a new gun. They're like, oh really? And that'll either end the conversation with someone who's not in the 2A and terrified of it. It may start a conversation with them that goes, well, why did you do that? And most people in the 2A be like, wow, that's cool. What'd you buy? And then they're going to say, let's go shooting. Why? Because there's kinship in our community. And there always has, there always will be. And that's why it's hard to see people try to compromise for the sake of trying to get more popularity votes with the other side. In reality, what they're trying to do is get you there no matter what. And with 32 bills, last time I saw, and I've talked about this on one of the podcasts here, 32 in the federal House and Senate, and 8 or 9 in the Roundhouse in New Mexico. This is a priority now, and if you watch the State of the Union, he definitely talked about gun violence and giving teachers extra money and all this other stuff. All the buzzwords that every politician wants to give you, he used them tonight. Don't believe him, because I can tell you in my entire life, and I'm 45 years old, and I've been shooting a very long time, I've never seen a politician, right or left, that actually 100% backed up what they said when it came to the 2A and actually got us our rights back or stopped the gun bill from happening. So those are my ideas for people that are trying to break into the 2A as new shooters. For those of you that have been shooters most of your life, be an advocate, be a mentor, because what we have to offer is knowledge that they're not going to find from a book. And what they will find from a book is limited in scope and theory. We've actually done it. And most of us have been doing it for a long, long time. This isn't my whole life as much as I love the 2A and guns, but it's a very big part of my life. It's a big part of my family. So I totally understand that daunting fear, because I have become the de facto guy for a lot of people, a lot of females, and not women I'm hitting on, people that are curious about this and actually generally afraid for their being. They will actually come to me and say, hey, what do you think about this? I'm thinking about a gun. I just got divorced, and I'm all alone, and I live in the sticks, and if something happens, what happens? What do I do? So we go shooting. And I bring my toys that I have. They're not toys. I bring my firearms that I think they're going to get something out of. And then we'll start that conversation about, what do you want for this? Do you need defensive stuff? Are you duck hunting? Are you Rocky Mountain mule deer hunting? Because that matters towards what you're going to want to purchase. Like, share, subscribe, Rumble. Be great.